Hello, all you wonderful people of the internet. I am the ZodiacLord, and welcome back to another video. Now, some of you might be looking at that title and thinking, wait a second, Zodiac, didn't your buddy Twisted Disaster already do a video like this? And you would be correct, she did. But you see, technically, it was my idea first that she liked, that she wanted to do for a video. So, haha, I thought of it first, suckers. No, but seriously. Technically, I got inspired of an idea to probably do this someday, and it's something I've wanted to do a long time because it seemed like I could make a fun video, and she liked the idea, so she decided to do it. So all you go watch her videos to see her roleplay pet peeves, which might be slightly similar to mine in some ways. But yeah, so you should all go check out that video if you wanna go see that. But this is gonna be my video about my roleplay pet peeves. So first of all, if you don't really like rambly, tangenty videos, then this may not be a video for you, and you're free to go. This is just me having some fun rambling about my thoughts and opinions. So, yeah, that's the thing. And secondly, if you like the art you see in the background of my characters goofing around, of me doodling this and whatever, and you want to learn more about what's going on, I'll put a link to the full image on my DeviantArt so you can read more if you're curious. If not, that's cool. No hard feelings. But yes, so with that out of the way, let's get into some roleplay business, shall we? So first of all, I should give a little bit of context about where, like, my roleplay background, I guess, just a little bit so you guys know my experience a little bit better. I haven't been roleplaying for that long, but when I found out about it, I really loved it. I really fell in love with it, and I still do to this day. I'm not as passionate about it as when I was younger-ish by a few years, but I still really do love to roleplay, and for anyone who's new to the internet, I guess, role-playing is basically just, you kind of make a story with someone, you have your characters, and you respond back and forth of what they do, and that kind of thing. I have role-played in many different ways. I've done it like the literary style, you know, where you're basically writing a book, and then I've also done it script style, which is where it's almost like, it's like character says and does this, you know, and then other character says and does this. I've done it both ways, and I find both of them just as fun depending on what the role play is. Sometimes one version's better for others and all that kind of thing. But I also haven't been, like, I don't really go to roleplay forums or anything like that. Most of my roleplay experience is like through back and forth notes on DeviantArt, and that kind of thing. And again, I'm less into it now, but I also have some like role plays in my mind that I like have a special place in my heart, and I find role playing to be a really, really wonderful way to like develop your characters and stuff. It makes you think about things that you wouldn't have thought about before, and that sort of thing. And I love it. I have a good time. But of course, with the good comes the bad. So I have a whole little list of bullet points that I wrote down during like a half awake moment of just thinking about things. So we're going to read these, and we're going to talk about some things in my roleplay experience that I'm not too fond of and that have gotten on my nerves a little bit. So yeah. So the first little thing I wrote down here was pushy people, which I'm sure if you've ever roleplayed, you've probably run across one of these people. Maybe you used to be one of these people. It's just the people who like really want you to reply fast, like they're really excited to do it, so they get kind of pushy, like they know you have a life outside, but it's like you don't reply for a little while, and they start resending the message over and over again, like you didn't see it, or, you know, they start asking like where you are, saying it's your turn, you know. It's like, it's just the kind of people who are a little bit pushy with things, which is honestly understandable sometimes. I mean, sometimes when you're really excited and then you're worried the person didn't get your message or something like that. So, you know, in some ways it's understandable, but it's also really annoying when you have your own life and you're trying to deal with things, and you have this person who's like really being kind of pushy and just a little bit annoying, you know? It's just a little thing. It's a very common thing, you know, not so big a deal. Another thing I wrote down was a lack of specification, and these are people who, you see this a lot with more like novice role players, like sometimes people who don't really role play outside of a small group, which is again totally understandable. But it's the kind of people who they ask you to role play, but they don't specify any details of like how they want to role play. Like, again, like I said, there are a lot of different ways to roleplay. There's like writing it like a script, writing it like a book, like who has what characters, using pre-made characters, making up characters as you go, just all this kind of different stuff that sometimes is really good to specify before you jump into a roleplay, and then they don't specify it, and then you guys get confused because, it's kind of a mess. Communication is key. It's always key in everything. Just take that advice. That's the moral of the story for today. Communication is key. But again, that's another one that's kind of like, not a huge deal. Not too life shattering. The next one I wrote down was God modders. Now, anyone who's roleplayed knows exactly what I'm talking about, I would hope. It's the people who try to take control of how your character thinks and acts and feels without your consent. And it's, oh goodness, it's very annoying. If you've roleplayed, you know exactly how annoying it is. It's basically like where a person tries to control your characters in a story, which is like, for example, it's like you say, like they tell you like your character walks in a room and suddenly is like terrified, and you're like, wait a second, how do you know that? It's my character. I know how they would react in this scenario. They wouldn't even be scared. Sometimes it can be little things, and then sometimes it can be big things, like proclaiming that your character died or did something terrible that they never would have had done in character, And there are ways to actually do it. Like, again, sometimes in role plays, sometimes it's actually helpful to be able to control someone else's character for real quick to help progress the story along. But usually, it's always good to ask, first of all. Second of all, there's a very big difference between little things like saying your character notices this to help progress a story, as opposed to saying your character saw my character walk into a room and they thought they were the most beautiful person and they were so enchanted. There's a big difference there. And it's something that's very annoying. And to tie into that, one of the next thing I wrote down was, no, that's not what happens. What I mean by that is it's the kind of people where you'll give a reply saying this thing that happens or whatever, but the other person maybe had something else in mind, like going into it, which is fine, but instead of trying to play off of what you did and figuring out, they respond with like, no, that's not what happens. Your character doesn't do that, that's not what happens. Which, again, if it's you controlling their character and them saying that's not what happens because my character wouldn't do that, that makes sense. But I'm talking about like you say, this chair breaks or whatever, and the other person's like, no, it doesn't, which is actually funny because I like to compare roleplay to improv because it is very, very similar. It's two people making up something as they go with sometimes a baseline, and then you play off of each other and see what happens. And one of the biggest rules of improv is never say no, and the reason why is because if you immediately shut someone down, then you doesn't go anywhere, And if you're going to basically do a role play and you only want the story to go how you picture it, then why are you role playing? Why don't you just go write your own story? That's kind of the whole idea with that one. It's very annoying. Overpowered in a bad way. This I mean with people who here's the thing. I think overpowered characters are perfectly fine when they're written correctly. I personally, one of my current favorite role plays right now, one of the stars of the role play is an extremely overpowered character who can honestly Deus Ex Machina a lot of the story, but it still makes it interesting. And the thing is, both me and the other person kind of make him overpowered together. So it's both of our ideas, and it's not like just me making him do all this crazy stuff. Oh, I bumped the mic. Making him do all this crazy stuff he shouldn't be able to do just for the fun of it, and then it being kind of like not fun anymore. It's kind of a consensual overpoweredness. But overpowered is not bad in a role play. It can actually be very fun to have a dynamic between a really, really powerful character and then a bunch of really not so powerful characters, you know? But where it becomes a problem is when people have an overpowered character who can kind of do anything to where the whole story just kind of doesn't happen and there's nothing fun for you to do because the other character is just kind of fixing everything. And it's like, well, gee, why am I even here? You can do the whole story by yourself, you know? And that's where kind of overpowered becomes a bad thing. And some people get kind of carried away with it, you know? Which is understandable, you know? Sometimes when you have a character who's powerful, you want to just make them powerful, but you kind of forget that to let other people have their fun too. So, you know, it's just one of those things. There's overpowered can be fun and good, and it can also be bad. It goes both ways. The next one I wrote down, oh, I feel so, oh goodness, my tired me, why did you do this? I wrote down role-playing bolts. You know, get it like Usain Bolts, but role-playing, oh, younger me. Younger me by probably a few days or weeks or something like that. But yeah, I think what I meant by this was because I have sometimes role-played with people who will like blaze through a story or a situation like really fast. Like something kind of big and dramatic will happen and it just like they make it like really quick, you know, and they progress it really fast when it feels like something that should be taking a little bit more time on, you know? That's kind of what I meant by that. It's something I've encountered a lot actually. It's just people like, you know, maybe intense like character relationship scenes, whether it be romantic or aggressive, and then it'll just kind of get blazed over and really done fast, or like there's some big problem that happens and again it just like gets kind of like whoosh, like we're already done with it, and it's like, okay, I felt like we could have spent a little more time on it, felt more things could happen there, you know. Which like, you know, there's a difference between just kind of like trying to keep the scene moving and not like taking like being again, like the dramatic difference of this would be someone like really dragging something out really long and you're like, okay, we got it, we can move on now. But like there's two evils here. One where it's a sloth dragging itself across the ground. You're like, okay, I feel like we've had this done for a while. Why is this still happening? As opposed to like a cheetah running by like, all right, we're already done with the scene now. So yeah, that's another little pet peeve. Oh boy. Next one was forcing ships that are doomed to sink like the Titanic. I've luckily not had this problem a whole lot, but I've had it sometimes, is when people will try to like force a pairing between characters that is very clearly not working out. Like again, like the characters just, the relationships aren't very compatible or anything like that. Now obviously if you go into a roleplay with the idea of shipping in mind, that might be a little bit different, and obviously if it's not working out, that means the roleplay is not working out as a whole. But like when you're doing a role play with somebody and they just kind of start like, it's like, yeah, I think this is a ship that can work, and you're sitting here like, my character really wouldn't be into this, you know? Which I've gotten a few times. It just kind of it's a little annoying because it's like, you know, they're not compatible. I mean, one-way relationships, you know, where one person's in love with the other, that's a cool, fun dynamic and thing to play around with, but sometimes you get people who just try to force ships that just really aren't working out, you know? It's just an unfortunate thing that happens sometimes. Another thing I wrote down, this is actually something that happened to me kind of recently. Someone wanted to role play with me. Didn't really even get to the third reply because of this issue. It's like they didn't even read your response. That's what I wrote down. Basically, it's like whenever you write down a whole response about like what your characters do and what your like the situation you have there, and then the person responds, but in such a way where it feels like they didn't even read what you said. Like they're not playing off of you or anything. It's like they kind of just ignored it, and God, it's something that like probably one of my bigger pet peeves, honestly. It just kind of gets a little bit on my nerves, because, you know, it's just frustrating because you feel like you put in all this effort for like how your characters would act, but then the story wasn't even paying attention. So then like, why did you bother? Which again, I got that recently. Like somebody did a thing and I wrote down a response. I started the role play. So I set it all up and I had my characters and they said something. And then the other person basically said, in a totally other part of the forest than where my characters were, something else happens. And I'm like, okay, so the story is not even connecting here, is what I'm getting. And it's just a little bit annoying when it feels like somebody didn't even read what you said. And that kind of tracks into my last little point here, piggyback writers. This is probably my biggest pet peeve of all when it comes to role-playing. It's the kind of people who basically, they don't seem to contribute to the story at all. They just seem to be kind of riding along with you, and it makes you feel like you're doing all of the work, and it takes a lot of the fun out of role-playing in the first place. Now, I should actually give a little bit of context here. A lot of my role plays historically have been with pre-made characters of mine. And a lot of my stories, a lot of you know, have a lot of characters and a lot of like pre-set-up story kind of things. So I am not unfamiliar and I am not like opposed to being someone to be a main driving force of a main plot. Because if I have most of the characters and I have most of the story, I don't mind driving most of the story. However, what I like to do is I like to set it up to where the other person's few characters, as opposed to my many, are like more of the main characters of the story, you know? More of the story will revolve around them, and while I'm setting up the actual plot, they're the character that has to experience the plot. You cannot see it right now, but I'm doing a lot of things with my hands. God, I needed like just one day record a face cam video for something just so you guys can see how much I move my hands when I get into a subject. Anyway, I digress. So my biggest example of this kind of thing, because again, I'll do this and I'll set it up, but then the other person, what gets on my nerves is whenever I will set this up and the other person, their character just kind of rides along with it. Like, it feels like I'm writing the entire story, and the other character is like, yeah, I'm here, I exist, you know? I'm just here for the ride, you know? And, I mean, I get it if it's kind of in the character's character, but, you know, sometimes I need a little bit more, and usually a story is not very good if the main character's not actually interacting with it, you know? And the best example of this, the best story I have of this is, I had a roleplay once with somebody that it went for a very long time. It wasn't a bad roleplay all around. It only, I think, ended because the other person left, I believe. So, you know, but there was a point in time where I had a lot of characters and I had like 3. So I was okay with being the one who has to write most of the story, you know? So I gave them, like, again, I'm not really someone who gets mad whenever it's like, you didn't reply with the exact same length of reply I did. How dare you? You're so lazy. You know, I don't feel that way. I think if your reply has enough content for me to play off of, I couldn't care less, you know? But I gave this person this very long setup reply. I mean, there was a lot of like my characters jabbing each other back and forth, whatever. But I was setting up, like, I had this whole plan established and all this kind of thing. And I ended it up basically trying to hand it to the person like, okay, other person's character, how does that sound to you? And the other person, like all of this context that they could have responded to, and the other person responded with, and I quote, sure. I was, considering the person had already had a little bit of this issue leading up, that was like the straw that broke the camel's back and made me had to like go out of character and tell the person, okay, listen, I need more than this. You can't just give me sure. Like, I can't, there's nothing I can do with that. It's just sure. Like, what am I supposed to say to that? I gave you so much you could respond to and your character just kind of nods, you know? That's probably, I think that's my biggest pet peeve with role-playing is just when people, and I understand not having an idea. It happens sometimes, but when you consistently let the other person kind of do everything, well, you're just kind of riding along, again, when you're just kind of piggybacking off of them, it kind of becomes like, why are you role-playing together? Why don't they just go write a story if you're just going to kind of give half-hearted, like, okays, whatever, and just kind of go along with it, you know? It's the reason why role-playing is so fun is whenever the other people do things and throw things at you that you have to figure out how your characters would react. That's like the big fun part of role playing, is because you don't technically know what happens, you know? But whatever another character is just kind of going along with it, like not really, like not even like saying much, not even giving a commentary over what's happening, you know? It becomes boring, you know? And that's probably my biggest pet peeve, which is probably why this is like the longest segment out of all this video. But yeah, that's kind of just my roleplay pet peeves. There's probably more, but I don't want to make this video too terribly long and get like too terribly nitpicky. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And hey, if you have any roleplay pet peeves you want to talk about, feel free to mention them in the description. Is there anything I didn't mention that really gets on your nerves? Is there anything you totally relate with me here? I would love to hear. Now then, ladies and gentlemen, before we officially end this video, I'd like to give a special shout out to my patrons. So first of all, to my $2 tier plus patrons, I love you too. Thank you so much for the support. Now let me give a high five to Slowpoke Queen for being my $5 tier plus patron. And finally, you know whose power levels are over $9? Hayden's Art, Shadowcat Inc., Twisted Disaster, FEMA, Angel of Darkness, and Skyak 2. Thank you all so much for your support, and I will see you guys in the next video, whatever it may be. Zodiac, out.